We start the year with Spider-Man in the Savage Land, trapped in quicksand. Apparently 1972 is the year we rhyme. After a branch snaps when he tries to pull himself out, Spider-Man prepares to sink, before a daring rescue from Kazar, who swings in to pull him out. After some reluctance from Kazar at first, the two agree to team up to rescue Gwen, who has been taken by a massive monster called Gog. Gog and Gwen are with Kraven the Hunter, who is looking to marry Gwen. He explains to his future wife how he came to the Savage Land to kill Kazar, and instead found a spaceship with a tiny Gog inside. Gog eventually grew bigger and bigger in a short space of time, and Kraven wants to use the monster to conquer the Savage Land and become its king. And that's Spider-Man's cue to distract Gog, while Kazar brings the fight to Kraven. Despite gas from his nipples and lasers also from his nipples, Kraven can barely get the upper hand. And even when he does, Kazar's saber-toothed tiger Zabu rescues his master. Eventually, Kazar kicks Kraven off a cliff. Meanwhile, Spider-Man is leading Gog on a chase and accidentally runs into a dinosaur. Fortunately for Spidey, Gog seems to hate dinosaurs more than our hero and breaks the dinosaur's neck. Spider-Man then leads the monster to where we started the story, to a pit of quicksand, and Gog sinks down and to his doom, with Spider-Man feeling sick about the whole thing. He's probably killed the last of an alien race. Elsewhere, Jonah and Kalkin are sad too, thinking that they've doomed Gwen and Peter, brought them to the jungle to die. And then Kazar shows up with Gwen, and Peter emerges from the undergrowth after changing out of his Spider-Man costume, and Jonah goes back to his old self, grumpy that Peter didn't take photographs while he was almost dying. And Gwen is excited to see Peter again, and they embrace before Kazar guides them back to their helicopter and they take a journey home. Back in New York, Peter is happy to be home. And now that the Daily Bugle is saved, he swings over to sell some photos of Spider-Man. But outside the building, he finds a protest. People angry that the Bugle cares more about Kazar and Spider-Man than it does about minority groups, the hungry, the jobless, the angry. Randy Robertson is part of the protest, and he calls out his dad, Robbie Robertson, for working for the man. And Robbie implies that he agrees with the protest, but says that he has to get to work, telling Randy to do what he needs to do, but to keep out of trouble. But not keeping out of trouble is Jonah, who is annoyed at the implication that he doesn't care, yelling to the protesters that the Bugle's been fighting for civil rights since before the protesters were even born. And then he pushes a protester in the face and the crowd turns on him, and it's up to Spider-Man to swing down and save him, leaving him hanging on the outside of a balcony to be ridiculed by the protest. But Spider-Man doesn't have time to see the ridicule. He has to race back to his apartment. Harry is coming back from hospital and they're throwing him a surprise party. But before the main surprise, Peter gets a little one first, when he sees that Flash Thompson has returned home from the army. Home for good. And then, just as MJ tries to flirt with Peter, Harry returns home to find a crowd of people who love him, and he sheds a tear. Meanwhile and elsewhere, still smarting over his ridicule, Jonah visits Spencer Smythe to see his new Spider Slayer. It's fast, can climb walls and can shoot webs, and Jonah simply has to have it. Later, he takes control of it back in his office and finds Spider-Man, who is confused about weird gadgets that have appeared on rooftops all over the city. But when Jonah commands the Slayer to attack, it doesn't listen. And then it does attack, but not when Jonah asks it to. Almost with a mind of its own, the Spider Slayer battles Spider-Man across the rooftops, before smashing Spidey through a wall and into a research hall filled with giant computers, knocking our hero out in the process. And while Jonah wasn't really in control, he's still happy to see Spidey defeated, but the Spider Slayer doesn't capture Spider-Man or unmask him, and Jonah smashes the controller on the ground. Smythe has failed him again, but Smythe had other plans. He was secretly controlling the Spider Slayer, guiding the fight towards the research hall and then commanding it to steal a master controller. All those devices on the rooftops that Spider-Man was confused about earlier were a surveillance system that Smythe helped devise for the police, a way to see the entire city. And while making it seem that Spider-Man did it, Smythe has stolen the Master Controller and now has eyes everywhere. And his first test of the system is to use the cameras to follow Spider-Man, follow him back to some webbed up civilian clothes, and watch him as he takes off his mask and reveals to Smythe his secret identity. An issue later, and Spider-Man's spider sense goes off. Somebody is watching him, and so he webs up the camera. But he has no idea if he's revealed his identity, doesn't know if anyone was watching through that camera, and he can't take any chances. And so he swings by Doc Connor's place to use his lab to make a mould and then a mask of his own face. Just skills that Spider-Man apparently has. Meanwhile and elsewhere, Professor Smythe has gathered the top 4 gang leaders of New York to sell them on his camera system that he invented for and then stole from the New York police. He shows the gang leaders how he can see across the whole city, perfect for heists and getaways, and then tunes back into Spider-Man, who is unmasked on a rooftop. But Spider-Man turns to the camera and removes his face, revealing that it wasn't his real face at all, but a mask. With Spider-Man essentially laughing at them, the gang leaders want him dealt with before they'll talk business. And so Smythe reveals a new Spider Slayer, just like the last one but twice as big, and he goes out spider hunting. Back with Spidey, and he's swinging through his supporting cast. He catches up with Jonah, who is leading a protest in front of the Bugle, angry at the cameras that have been put on rooftops. Then he checks in on Harry, newly returned from hospital, who is worried about Mary Jane, and how he can't get her to take him seriously. It's at that point that Mary Jane arrives with pizza and friends and proceeds to not take Harry seriously, flirting with Peter and asking him to go somewhere private with her. But Peter has a date with Gwen. But before Peter and Gwen can go out together, Gwen wants to check on Flash Thompson, who is back from the army and not acting like himself. He's apparently having a tough time getting used to being a civilian again, and when Gwen asks him if that was all that was bothering him, he gets annoyed at them both. And so Peter's date with Gwen is spent talking about Flash and what's wrong with him as they walk and watch a film in the cinema and have dinner at a cafe. And Peter's feeling jealous of Flash as he walks Gwen home, until he learns that Gwen is just upset that a friend is unhappy and that she'd feel the same for any of her friends. And now Peter loves her even more, for her soul, and the two end the date with a kiss. Then, after leaving Gwen at her home, Peter's Spider-Man again, and finds himself spotted by a camera and then trapped in a giant web, and gassed with an ethyl chloride type gas that can weaken a spider. A spider slayer bears down on him, bigger and stronger than last time, but Spider-Man is confident. He's beaten lots of spider slayers before, and they'll always be guided by remote control from a safe distance away. Spider-Man is live and on the scene, except that he learns that this spider slayer is big enough to be piloted by Smythe himself. Webbed up and weak, Spider-Man decides to play to Smythe's ego, to give the weakening gas time to wear off. He gets Smythe talking about all the previous spider slayers that Spidey slayed instead, but just as the gas wears off, Smythe hits him with another dose before taking him back to the gang leaders of New York. With proof of Spider-Man's capture, they'll now help Smythe rob some banks. Meanwhile and elsewhere, Gwen is wondering where Peter is, and instead bumps into Flash. He apologises for how he treated her and Peter, and admits feelings for Gwen, more than friendship feelings. But Gwen turns him down. She loves Peter, and she asks him what else is going on, and he wants to tell her, but he just can't. Elsewhere, as Smythe mans the cameras and the New York gang leaders head out to rob some banks, Spider-Man is feeling a little stronger, and he's able to twist upwards and snap the webbing that holds him. He falls onto the Spider Slayer below, and he's able to fight the robot uninterrupted, with Smythe deciding to not leave the cameras unmanned. Spidey is able to get into the Spider Slayer's cockpit and make a phone call to the police. Then, since Smythe locks himself down with steel doors, Spidey swings out into the streets of New York to stop those gang leaders robbing that bank. As he swings there, he sees that his phone call worked, and that the police are shutting down the spy cameras on the rooftops, leaving Smythe without a view of the city, and leaving the gang leaders unwarned when he swings down to fight them. They're easily defeated, and when Spidey returns to capture Smythe too, he finds that the villain has returned to the cockpit of his Spider Slayer. But the Slayer is out of control, and Spider-Man reveals that he didn't just make a phone call from inside the cockpit earlier, he also sabotaged the controls, and so this fight too is easily won, and Spidey leaves Smythe for the police. But there's one more person responsible for this whole mess, and that's J. Jonah Jameson, who is enjoying the attention from his protest. Spidey swings in and threatens Jonah, making him promise to never pay for a Spider Slayer again, before swinging away. With everyone defeated, the day has been a success. But as he swings to meet up with Gwen, he spots her with Flash, and Flash looks scared. Then he watches a police car pull up and arrest Flash, and it seems that Flash knows why and has been waiting for this moment to happen. But we'll have to wait a while because it's Christmas Eve, and Peter Parker is cold at the beach, taking photographs of people running out into the water. But he's able to warm up quickly when Sandman attacks the swimmers, swinging in to fight when the police prove ineffectual. He's able to web the Sandman up, but when Spidey mentions that it's Christmas Eve, Sandman seems surprised, disperses into the sandy beach, and disappears. Since Peter has a date with Gwen, he decides to let the Fantastic Four know about Sandman, since he's basically become one of their villains now. But instead of 4, he finds only 1, a sad and lovelorn Johnny Storm. The two of them realise that they've both fought Sandman at the bridge between New York and New Jersey, and so they head in a Fantastic car to New Jersey, where they figure that Sandman has a base. In Jersey, they stop some thieves from stealing presents, and stop a truck that's slipping on the ice from crashing, mostly against their will, as Spidey wants to get to Gwen and Johnny wants to just be sad and angry with the world. But then they find Sandman and swoop down to capture him. But thanks to a new belt that the wizard has given him that can turn him into a cement block or a sandstorm, Sandman easily defeats them instead, leaving them tied together in a water tower. As he leaves, he tells Johnny to keep his chin up. As the water rises, Spider-Man dives down into the water to see that they're tied together in a way that means that only one of them can keep their head above water. And so Spider-Man stays underwater, giving Johnny Storm just enough time for his face to get dry enough to flame on, and for him to then spit fire at the rope that binds them. As they dry off, they realise that the Sandman wanted them to escape, that he gave them a clue as his parting words. They find Sandman again climbing into a home, and when they chase him inside, he's looking human and telling them to be quiet. He reveals that this is his mother's home, that she's old and that she's sick, and she doesn't know that he's a criminal. He comes to visit her every Christmas Eve. He promises to turn himself in if they just give him a moment, and so Johnny and Spidey give him that moment. And Spidey gives him a present to give to her too, a brooch that he was going to give to Gwen. But when that moment is up, they find that it's only Sandman's mum left in the home, and some grains of sand in the sink. But since it's Christmas, they'll give him a break, and they'll capture him next time. And at least the Human Torch is feeling a lot happier about this time of year. But we can't celebrate Christmas for long, because we're back at that moment when Spider-Man and Gwen saw Flash taken away by some men in a car. And when Spider-Man follows, that car is then attacked by another party, who are speaking Vietnamese and releasing gas grenades to hide an abduction attempt. Since Spider-Man doesn't know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, he focuses on just keeping Flash away from both. This is made more difficult when he's knocked down by a 7-foot-tall man in a chauffeur uniform, but he's able to knock that hulking figure off balance and web up the would-be abductors before swinging away with Flash Thompson in his arms. On a nearby rooftop, he demands answers from Flash. Why are people trying to kidnap him? So Flash explains, that many months ago in Vietnam he had been wounded and separated from his platoon, and had found a hidden temple that wasn't on any map. The people there, including a high priest and his daughter, a girl around Flash's age, nursed him back to health, and showed him great kindness despite him being a stranger and a potential enemy. But when he was well enough to head back to his camp, never to forget the kindness that he was shown, he learned that his base had been ordered to attack Sector B, which is where the temple was. Since it wasn't on any maps, his higher-ups didn't believe him, thought him delirious when he tried to stop the bombing, and so he raced back to the temple instead to warn the people that showed him kindness. However, they refused to leave, and the bombs dropped, and Flash fell unconscious, only to awaken back at his camp. But word got out in Vietnam that Flash had visited the temple, and angry, bitter people blamed him, thought that he had scouted the temple out for destruction, and they'd followed him back to America. And they were the people that Spider-Man had fought, and the first group were just trying to protect Flash. But Flash thinks that there might be more to all this, something that he doesn't know, and Spider-Man leaves him to ponder this question as he delivers Flash via web back to the people who are charged with protecting him. Later, at home, after Peter Parker is able to quickly lie to his Aunt May about the sticky substance that she finds leaking out of his room, Gwen Stacy arrives, worried about Flash's kidnapping. Despite jealousy rearing its head, Peter agrees to go find out more. They go to the Federal Building where Flash is being held, but they're denied entry. However, Peter's spider sense goes off, and he notices the very noticeable 7th chauffeur from earlier, clearly attempting to grab Flash again. And so he makes excuses to Gwen, climbs out a window, and slips a spider tracer into the chauffeur's pocket. Suddenly there's an explosion at the other end of the corridor and the lights go out. The men are going for Flash now, so Peter smashes through the glass to fight them, hoping that the darkness will hide his identity, and sticking to the walls to protect his feet from the broken glass. But as much as he attempts to stay out of the chauffeur's grasp, the big strong man is also surprisingly fast, and he's able to grab Peter's leg and throw him into a door. And since they now have Flash, the chauffeur marches away and drives off with Peter's friend as our hero lies dazed. Peter's brought out of his daze by the sound of Gwen shouting his name. He emerges from the smoke, pretending to have been caught in the explosion before making an excuse again. He has to chase after Flash, has to rescue Flash. But Gwen won't have it. Every time there's danger, she says, he's always leaving and running off, and others are starting to call him a coward. If Peter loves her, he should stay with her. And so Peter is left with the dilemma. He's the only one who can find Flash, but if he does, he might lose the woman that he loves. His only other choice is to tell Gwen that he's Spider-Man. Elsewhere, in a different time, Johnny Storm is alone in the Baxter Building, feeling sorry for himself and drinking bad coffee. He gets a visit from Spider-Man, but when Johnny rides the elevator down to meet his friend, Spider-Man greets him with a punch to the face, without saying a word. Also, Sandman, the Trapster, and the Wizard are standing behind him. It seems that Spider-Man has broken bad, and so the Human Torch fights Spider-Man, burning out of webbing and throwing fireballs. And throughout the fight, Spidey is uncharacteristically silent, and also using the same old tactics, like he's running on autopilot. But even Spider-Man on autopilot is too much for the Human Torch, and our hero is knocked out and then encased in hardened paste, courtesy of the Trapster. But he is able to listen in to the Frightful Four talking, to discover that they have put Spider-Man into a trance, so good that Sandman can slap the hero with no response, and that the Wizard wants to use the Baxter Building to tap into the negative zone, to power their own cosmic device. But the Wizard accidentally summons a Nihilus, who locks them out of the Baxter Building's computer and draws on its power to manifest on Earth. And the Trapster's traps and Sandman's sand are no good against this villain. And so it's up to Johnny Storm, so he hardens the paste with fire to break free and then uses broken glass to remove a straitjacket. Then, when Sandman investigates the noise, he blasts him with a fireball mid-transition and turns Sandman to quartz. In the other room, he's less lucky. He's doused by liquid discs thrown by the trapster and then knocked down by Spider-Man. Again, and again, and again. When Spider-Man grabs him and raises his fist once more, Johnny tries to get through to his friend. They're friends. Spider-Man wouldn't hurt his friend, right? And the gambit works, and Spider-Man is a free man again. And now it's the Human Torch and Spider-Man versus the Frightful 2, and that's an easy fight, as Torch burns out of a trap and Spidey throws the trapster into the wizard. But now they've both got to deal with Annihilus, who has gained form and is stepping into their world, and they can't use any of the controls. But fortunately, Spider-Man is a science major and realises that they can simply pull out the plug, and the great Annihilus is defeated. And Sandman is defeated too when he comes out groggy and Spider-Man smashes him into sand. With the threat ended, Spider-Man swings home to have a shower, leaving Johnny Storm to clean up the mess. Then we're back with Peter Parker having to choose between saving Flash or making Gwen think that he's a coward, and he chooses option C, make a web dummy of himself in the bathroom and then swing off as Spider-Man and pretend that he's kidnapped himself as Peter. This isn't the first time that he's pretended to kidnap himself, but it works again, and Gwen feels guilty for not letting Peter leave. Maybe if she let him leave, he wouldn't have got kidnapped. Now Spider-Man is able to track down the spider tracer he left on the big guy, but instead his spider sense triggers at something else, an invisible presence of Doctor Strange in his astral form, who uses that same spider sense to guide Spider-Man to his Sanctum Sanctorum. Strange greets our hero and shows him a projection of Flash Thompson held captive. They listen in on the scene and learn that the High Priest in the temple in Vietnam didn't die, but instead fell into an eternal sleep, only to be awoken if the person who put him into the sleep is killed. And they think that Flash was that person. Then the High Priest's daughter, Sha Shan, appears, and even though Flash begs her to tell them the truth about what happened, she refuses, and Flash is destined to be killed at a holy hour. With no time to lose, Spider-Man races to the rescue, aided by Doctor Strange. Meanwhile, locked away until the holy hour in which he'll die, Flash is visited by Sha Shan, who confirms that she knows that he's innocent, but that her father's followers would never believe her if she had said. She reveals that she was the one who carried Flash back to his camp in Vietnam, and that she cannot disobey orders. Then she raises a knife out of her robes, brandishing it at Flash, before she's stopped by her father's men, because it's too early to be killing Flash, too early for the ceremony. Meanwhile and elsewhere, Gwen Stacy visits Peter Parker's apartment, hoping to find him there. Her worry is heard by Aunt May, who then worries about what happened to her nephew, what happened to the poor boy, but Gwen yells at her. Peter is not a boy, he's a man. When will May let him go? Then with sudden regret, Gwen apologises. She had no right to speak to May that way. But Aunt May won't accept the apology. Maybe they were the words that she needed to hear. Back with Flash, and the holy hour is upon him. Time for him to be killed. Fortunately, Doctor Strange is there to magically disappear the axe before it can cut off his head. And Spider-Man is there to untie Flash, web the large chauffeur in the face, flip him to the ground, and keep everyone back, as Doctor Strange casts another spell, this time on the High Priest. With his spell cast, the High Priest is reborn. In another room, Flash Thompson finds Sha Shan, who tells him that she wasn't going to use the knife to kill him, but to free him from his bindings. Before they can escape together, Sha hears her father's voice, and the two return to the main chamber. Sha delighted to see that her father is alive. Doctor Strange reveals that he was never dead, just in a magical sleep, and that he was able to reach out to Strange psychically, calling on the Sorcerer Supreme's aid. But now that he's helped, Strange flies away, and Spider-Man is left with Flash, who's excited to tell Gwen Stacy this tale, and the lingering doubts that old Peter Parker will never be able to compete with the likes of Flash Thompson. Elsewhere in Nevada, the Hulk is under attack. Thanks to life model decoys in Hulkbuster armor and electrified nets, General Ross, Nick Fury and Captain America are able to capture the Green Giant. When he turns back into Bruce Banner, they sedate him and load him into a titanium car on a journey to New York for the Hulk to stand trial. And in New York, a certain blind lawyer gets a phone call, and Matt Murdock learns that he'll be defending the Incredible Hulk. He packs up his things, says goodbye to the Black Widow, and gets on a jet to meet with his client before they get to court. But Bruce Banner is too sedated to be able to have any real conversation, so Matt speaks to General Ross, convinces him to give Bruce a stimulant. If he doesn't, the whole trial will get thrown out for violating Banner's rights, and so they wake Banner up and hope that it's not too stimulating for him. Meanwhile, at their destination at JFK Airport, security is tight. J. Jonah Jameson and his photographer Peter Parker are being refused entry by security, despite Jonah's bluster. And in the air above them, the Fantastic Four arrive by Fantasticar, asked to be character witnesses for Bruce Banner, although the Thing would rather fight him again. They're here to make sure that nothing bad goes down before the trial. And on the plane, something bad is going down. Learning that he's had a stimulant, Bruce panics, begins sweating, and becomes the Hulk once more. But before he can do any damage, Matt Murdock stands in front of him, telling the Hulk that he is his friend. He doesn't think that the Hulk is a killer, and he wants to convince everyone else too. Hulk settles and shakes Matt's hand as the plane comes in for a landing. As it does, General Ross tells Matt to stand away to let S.H.I.E.L.D. handle the Hulk, and Hulk gets mad, thinking that Matt Murdock has lied to him. As General Ross yells at his troops to open fire, the Hulk comes smashing out of the plane, much to the Thing's delight. As the Thing begins to fight and then lose against the Hulk, Peter Parker leaves, feigning illness and leaving an angry Jonah in his wake. He arrives as Spider-Man, after Daredevil has also tried to defeat the Hulk and as the Human Torch is blinding him, but he steps aside when the Thing tells him that he doesn't need any help to take on the Hulk. Only, the Thing definitely does need help, when his best punch is simply shrugged off by the Hulk. And so Reed Richards shoots the Hulk with a Nega Gamma Ray, hoping to turn him back into Bruce Banner, but rendering him unconscious instead. After days of being held captive, it is finally time for the Hulk's court case. But the Hulk is being chained up, and Matt Murdock objects to the treatment, telling the judge that it will prejudice the jury against his client. But his complaint is denied for the safety of the court, and the trial goes ahead. While people like General Ross can talk uninterrupted about what a menace the Hulk is, when Matt Murdock calls the Avengers as witnesses, they're met with objection after objection. And even when allowed to speak, Iron Man must admit that the Hulk is a danger to people. But when he tries to explain more, he's told that there's no room for opinion in this court. As a last-ditch effort to save the case, Matt Murdock calls the Hulk to the stand. He explains to the Hulk that he is his friend, that he's trying to save the Hulk's life. But Hulk says that he doesn't have friends, that no one wants to help Hulk, that all men are crazy. Matt points out to the jury that the Hulk is clearly confused but not evil, and hopes to end the case on the grounds that his client isn't mentally fit to stand trial. But the judge denies the request, and Matt is forced to rest his case. But just before the judge can call for a recess, Mr. Fantastic appears from out of a grate. He explains that he has a device that should be able to permanently turn the Hulk into Bruce Banner, that he tried it before at the airport and it hadn't worked, but that he's been working on it since, and believes it should do now what it's supposed to do. He requests permission to shoot the Hulk, saying that Bruce Banner should have a chance to speak in his own defense, and noting that a permanently cured Hulk solves every issue. The judge agrees to the shooting, and so Reed Richards shoots the Hulk with his Nega Gamma Ray. But instead of transforming him back to Bruce, It makes the Hulk stronger, and he rips out of his bindings and smashes out of the courtroom and escapes. As Matt and Reed stand in the middle of the gaping hole left by the Hulk, Matt admits that he suspects that Reed knew that this would happen, that Reed had engineered the gun to grant the Hulk temporary power, and Matt only has one response to that: thank you. Thanks for watching, and thanks to my patrons listed here for supporting this channel. A special thank you too to Christian Robertson at the producer level. If you want to get early or exclusive episodes or your name in the credits at the end, head over to my Patreon, the link is in the description, where you can also watch every video without ads for free. In the next video, we finish off 1972 with the return of Morbius and the final issue written by Stan Lee.